Welcome everybody to this session. We're very excited to be having some really excellent speakers with us today. So I'm going to introduce our speakers in order. So we're going to start off with Patcharaporn Srisaikaew. Then it's going to be followed by Zen Faulkes and then Stuart Oldham. And they're all going to talk about different aspects of presenting, all very relevant for the upcoming OHBM. So we're very excited to hear their expertise. We'll start off with Patcharaporn, who also goes by the name Nock. So Nock is a postdoctoral fellow at Cranbrook Research Institute in Toronto, Canada. And she's helped organise OHBM programming on the international collaboration opportunities for early career researchers. And she's also been highly involved in the SPSIG in previous years. And we look forward to hearing her speak with us about networking and collaboration. Take it away, Nock.
Good, thank you, Erin. Let me share my screen. Okay. Can everyone see my screen? How can I make it?
Looks good.
Yeah, okay, so good. Okay, so hi everyone. So my name is Nock. I'm really excited to be here as a part of the panel because to me the conference like OHBM, I joined OHBM for 5 or 6 years already, like straight in a row. And OHBM is a conference that can generally help shape your career, especially for myself. So what I wish someone told me earlier is that your goal is not to impress people, but your goal is like of how much you know, but is to make sure that your research is easy to understand and that make yourself approachable enough for audience or people want to talk to you afterwards. So I will focus on some practical things that actually make a difference, at least to my experience. So one of the mindsets that shift entirely of like my thought is that your poster is not your paper. People are standing around, distracting, holding a coffee, chit chat, turn left, turn right, and they are not going to read your whole paragraph even. So what I have learned over time is conferences are not just about presenting the data, but they are really about communicating idea, exchanging knowledge and building a lasting connection. So you can think of a simple flow that you start with your own research, but then what really make it matter, like how clearly you can present it out, because the way you present it is what something that lead to the conversation, and the conversation is where the opportunity actually happen. So for me, I would like to give you 3 key takeaway. 1, communicate clearly, which means that your work can be very, very rigorous. It can be super significant, super cool. But if people don't understand it, the impact is very limited. They don't understand. They don't get it. Second, the conversation matter the most, meaning that many collaboration, like idea, even like job opportunities, doesn't come from like a formal presentation itself usually, but they come from the informal direction afterward. And third, preparation over perfections. You don't have to be flawless, you don't have to be perfect, but you just need to be clear, prepared, and approachable. The combination of this, I would say, will make most people not only understand your work, but also want to engage with you afterwards. One biggest mistake that I see is trying to say too much. Early in my PhD, I gave a presentation where I tried to include everything. As a PhD like student, you're like a peanut in this whole world, but you think like I'm so proud of my baby, which is like your PhD project. You try to squish everything in your poster, a method or analysis, every single stat detail, every figure, like, oh my God, it's so beautiful. I really want to squeeze everything in to make it sound rigorous. But afterward, someone asked me a very simple questions like, so what is your main takeaway? I was froze a little bit. And then I realized that I hadn't made it clear at all. I just keep telling the whole story, but not one key takeaway like why I did this. So that is my turning point. So since then, I always start with one clear message or one clear sentence that to make everything else much more easier. So for example, in my research, in my postdoc research, I did study in one of the chronic pain condition. It's called trigeminal neuralgia. So it's also known as a suicidal disease, and it's one of the most painful experience that one can experience. So every poster, talks, seminars, symposium, everything, I always start with one sentence. For example, like imagine that you are living with the most painful experience that one can experience. How you think you're gonna feel? And then I'll pause, I'll let them think. And then like, oh, is there a really condition? I was like, yeah, this condition called trigeminal neuralgia or TN, which I'm going to walk you through why it is so important and why I started it. And then I walk them through how do we do it? Why does it matter? And what next? That's all about it. So even before open your PowerPoint, your design slide of the poster, ask yourself one question. What is one big sentence that I want people to remember? Because realistically, most people will only remember one thing. But if you don't define it, they won't either. So that's my take. So one thing that I want you to remember is this. A simple structure that's really well is that what problem are you solving? What did you do? What did you find? Why that is matter? And if someone walk away, understand that why it matter piece, you have already done better than most presentation because they understand your work. So your goal is to make your message visible within like 10 seconds, I would say. For the poster, make one clear figure, minimal text, make it very obvious takeaway. And if someone can glance at your poster with a cup of coffee in their hand, sipping it, and then, oh, I got that is what it's about. That's all it is. And that's how the conversation happened. Another thing is that I would like to say Q&A is something that a lot of people worry about. And they were so nervous about like being asking question. Me too. I've been there. But it's actually an opportunity, not a test. Think it as an opportunity. Don't be nervous. A simple approach is just listen carefully, pause for a second. Oops, sorry. Pause for a second, think about it, give yourself some time to digest the question, understand the question, and then answer briefly. The pause doesn't it's the pause might feel long to you that oh no, I paused so long, I think so long. But no, to the audience, it's the confidence, it's a signal of confidence that you take the question seriously. So I remember in one of my early conference presentation that I was so nervous about Q&A and that I tried to anticipate every possible question and memorize all the answer was like, reading all the textbooks, scroll to my phone all the time, like try to be very, very well prepared. But at that time, I feel not having all the answer that I like when I wanted prepare. So I just realized that is it's just a thing that like it come natural. Like be confident, be yourself, and it is okay. It completely okay to not know everything in this whole world. Saying something like that's great question, but we haven't explored it yet, or oh, that's very interesting. I haven't heard about it. Could you share some idea that you have? Is much better than trying to over explain or guessing. People unexpecting perfection, people unexpecting a textbook answer from you, but they are looking for the clarity and sometimes I would say honest, and that how the conversation happen and opportunity come afterward. And finally, networking. I think this part is was people overcomplicate the most. Some of the most valuable connection I have ever made at the conference actually start with a very simple conversation, not formal networking, not like from a formal in like formal presentation, but it's just asking someone that they are working on like casually. Because I stay curious, and the curious help people to understand your work, and they make them feel comfortable to talk to you. So my trick is that I always ask myself if I'm ready to networking today, like meaning that I have to be curious. It's not like I never force myself to network. If if OHBM like that day literally drain all my energy, I go back to like my hotel and then I sleep. I'm not forcing to like go out, drink, and then your eyes like cannot hold it anymore. So don't force it, be natural. Um, and you don't need to be super extrovert. I am very, very extrovert myself. Sometimes I feel I don't know what to say. Like I don't, yeah, I really run out of words. But you don't have to be a perfect like pitch. Networking is something that's a really small, a general conversation about science, about like, why are you working on this? What are you working on? What are you trying to do? It's just like natural curiosity, I would say. And that's a part is often overlooked. That is the following up. Some of the short message afterward are a very nice, like nice meeting them can go a long way. I met one of the prof that like we have a chat over like we met at the coffee table, and we was like, I think I saw you in like same poster session, like are you working on like this, which is like the same topic as I did? Like what did you do? Like, oh, what technique do you use? Do you like what methodology do you use? And then like just that. And then I remember like I memorized his name, and then I emailed later that hey, I came across one of the paper that used the same method that you did. And then we meet briefly over the coffee table. Do you remember? And then we keep in touch from there. Is amazing. Like when it comes naturally. So in my experience, most opportunity don't come in a presentation itself, they come from the conversation afterward. And lastly, I would like to say be yourself, and good luck at OHBM. You got this. Thank you. And I'm happy to take any questions if the audience have.
That was fantastic, Nook. Thank you. I really liked how you talked about the fact that it's a conversation, it's not perfection. And this is all just an opportunity to connect. It's not a quiz. I think that there are things that always run through my mind when I first went to my first conference, I was very stressed about that. And I think going to conferences, that's where the imposter syndrome comes out quite strongly,
Yeah,
until you then connect with someone,
yeah.
and then you realize actually everyone feels the same way as you and they just want to make friends and connections.
Exactly. That's all about it. It not Yeah, like because I've been there, I've been to the part that I was very nervous about this. I was like, I have to show how much I know about my work. I have to show that our work is so significant. It can help the world. It can help solve everything, and I have to know everything. If anyone come to me, I can answer one, two, three, four, five. You so straight. You don't enjoy conference as much as you're supposed to. So like in the letters, like maybe like when we got more senior, we've been to the conference more often, and then it was like, yeah, just chill. You got this. You can like just chill, enjoy it. And if you don't like, don't even force yourself to try to attend as many as symposium that you want. It just pile up in your app, and you're gonna sleep over it at some point. You're like, that's okay. Just like, I'm done. And like don't feel bad about yourself. Just yeah, just be yourself and enjoy your time at the conference, and then you will get the most out of it. Because if you not enjoy, you're not feeling happy by yourself, it's so hard to get things unhappily. Like
I think being authentic It
True.
sounds like a really important thing because
Yeah.
it's hard enough going to a conference if you're then playing a character or being something that you're not. That's even more exhausting.
Exactly. Yeah, some of people go to the conference hoping to like find a job too. So over prepare over like the presentation, then over prepare like resume, job interview, like they're hoping to find some opportunity, just like straight over things and things like pile up on each other. And it just make yourself like so stressed and you not enjoy the conference. The conference has so much more positive vibe. Like you meet your new colleague, you meet your old colleague, you meet your teammates, you meet like somebody that like across the globe that use exactly the same thing that you use, and then but in different population. And wow, you also found the same. Oh my gosh, we should do collaboration. We should like link this and that together. It's wonderful. Yeah,
Fantastic. Did
thank
anyone
you.
have any questions that they wanted to ask Knock?
I might actually. Oh, 1 second. I might actually ask a question, Ak, if that's okay.
Yes.
So you're talking about pacing yourself and choosing where to go and like don't try to do everything, which is a problem I definitely have, and I think a lot of like junior scientists also have. So
Yeah.
do you have any advice on how to choose what to not go to, on what to say no to in a conference?
Mm-hmm. A no to is hard because I choose what to go to. Like I have a priority list that I was like, okay, like right now, what I want to know. Like I skim through it. And then I even attend like, some of like out of topic, like not even involved in my project or paper, but I'm curious about it. I want to know. I go with it. Like I attend that. So I'm pretty trust my instinct of like what I'm curious about, and then I attend those sessions. Yeah. But but I don't have like not go to. Some people said that if it's like, not a part or include in your work, it's like not for them. But for me, it's like no, it's like based on my curiosity, based on what I want to know, what I want to learn. And they try to open like, the opportunity like why to listen to like gain more experience, because I believe we are all a lifelong learner. We can learning as much as we want, and life is still going on. So just give yourself a chance.
Fantastic. Thank you, Knock. Well, we might move on just in the interest of time. And if anyone has any more questions, please pop them in the chat and I'm sure we can get to them at the end as well. Zen, it's your turn. So, our second speaker, Zen, is an assistant professor of biology at Bluefield State University in Virginia, in the United States. Zen is the author of Better Posters, Plan, Design, and Present an Academic Poster, and runs the widely read Better Posters blog. We're delighted to have him speaking with us today about poster design and presentation. So take it away.
Why, thank you. And to all of you watching today, good afternoon, good morning, or good evening. It's so hard to tell on the internet. And today, I'm very pleased to be speaking on what has unofficially become known as Star Wars Day. Now, because this is the internet, some of you may say, hey, I'm across the international date line. It's already Tuesday where I am, and it's not May the 4th. Well, that's okay, because there's the Revenge of the 5th. And I'm going to run a little bit with some sort of Star Wars inspired things that you can take to think about with your poster. Now, for Star Wars fans, the big news is that we are getting a new Star Wars movie this month, featuring one of the two people in this picture, the one on the left, in case you don't know. The one on the right is Robert Rodriguez. He's a film director, and he directed some of the episodes of The Mandalorian, which inspired the upcoming movie. He has a really interesting filmography, but one of the things that he's also known for is his fantastic Blu-ray DVD bonus features. And what he put on a lot of his movies was what he called the 10-minute film school. And these were just so fantastic, so informative. I just was really inspired by that. So I'm going to try and, in that vein, try and get you out of here with 4 tips that will hopefully improve your posters in 10 minutes. Ready? Start the clock. The first thing is that the title of your poster is really, really, really important. Now, what we have pictured here is a clapper from the filming of one of the Star Wars movies, Blue Harvest. Now, you may, even if you are not a Star Wars fan, you might go, wait a second, I've never heard of a Star Wars movie called Blue Harvest. That's because that was the working title that they used to keep secrecy around the production so that people wouldn't know that they were working on Star Wars movies, because interest in this film was sky high. So Blue Harvest was the initial title, which later became known as Revenge of the Jedi. And you may have the similar reaction of, wait a second, Revenge of the Jedi? That is not a movie title. Well, that's because they were quite far down. They actually printed posters. They were committed. They were printed posters that said Revenge of the Jedi. But Star Wars fans, being obsessive nerds, said, but revenge is not the way of the Jedi, so why is the movie called? And so they changed the title again, printed new posters again. And the moral of this story is, be prepared to really workshop your titles. Don't just write down and use the first title that has come to mind, because it may not be the best title. Titles are hard. And even if you think, well, I've already written my title in the abstract, if you haven't printed your poster, you can change the title on your poster. Nobody will stop you. And you might actually have a better title that way. Now, the title, how important is it? I would say that your title is 75% of your communication for your entire poster, resides in the title. Now, that's a very specific number, and it's an empirically based number because we now have social media. And one of the things that you can find out is how many people share articles. Well, 75% of people will share an article without clicking on the article. If they don't click it, we know they haven't read it. Now, that frustrates the heck out of the people who wrote the articles, but it re-emphasizes the fact that people are making a decision and taking action based just on the title alone. So people will be skimming through either an abstract book or online or walking through the poster hall, and they're going to be looking at titles. And a lot of them will make a decision just based on that title. Another way that you want to make sure that you give the title the importance that it is so much of your communication effort is not just in terms of what it says, but how it looks. This is the original Star Wars poster. And honestly, I don't think the title is very well served on this poster. It's kind of dark, small, down and in the corner. Now, another poster that has a very, very similar design in terms of the artwork, I think, does a much better job. You cannot miss the title. It's bigger, it's higher contrast. This is what you want to aspire to with your title. You should be able to see it across the hall or from space, and somebody should be able to know what the title of your poster is. So by way of comparison, here's something that, again, I don't think does the title a very good job. The title is up at the top, yes, but look at how big it is compared to everything else around it. It's definitely smaller than all those author names. It's kind of being crowded out by institutional logos, and it's not even really bigger than the headings on the poster below it. So it's not really giving visual importance of the title. The title should be the most important thing on the poster. Tip number 2, the 5-minute limit. I surveyed people about, if you go to an academic conference, how long do you want to spend at a poster? A few generous souls said maybe 10 minutes, but the vast majority said, I want to be out of there in 5 minutes because I want to see other posters, right? So that means if you have a poster that maybe looks like this, people are going to run. And they are not going to stay and look at your poster because nobody's got time for that, right? The goal here, to pick up on something that Knox said, is to start conversations. That's how you win. And just to sort of give you a little bit more, remember that reading is hard. Luke Skywalker can't even read. But most of us tend to forget that reading is hard and stressful and difficult. It's a hard-fought skill. And most people read at maybe 200 words a minute. That's if you're a very skilled reader, which most people at a scientific conference would be. So if you think about 5 minutes, that means 1,000 words on your poster is probably the absolute maximum that you want to have on a poster. Now that reading speed, though, of course, is going to come down if the reading is very technically dense. So you probably want to come several hundred words below that. If you have a more complex kind of terminology, you probably want to be in a few hundred words overall for your poster. Tip number 3, don't be anonymous. Like all these stormtroopers, right, look alike. And in The Force Awakens, we have one character, Finn, who starts off as a stormtrooper. And so that the audience can track, oh, that's this guy. Early on in the movie, he gets this distinctive smear of blood on his helmet so that you can follow him and know, oh, it's that one. That's Finn, although we don't know his name at that point. So one of the things is, ask yourself, how is my poster going to stand out? How is somebody going to recognize my poster and what it's about? Here's another example of a poster that really, when you look at it without reading the title, if that's just blah, blah, blah words, this poster has words, a line graph, a bar graph, and really there's nothing that sets it apart or tells you what it is visually, right? It could be a psychology poster. It could be a political science poster. It could be a biology poster. It could be a nursing poster, which it is. Now compare that to maybe something like this poster. You right away know this is not nursing, this is not psychology, this is not political science, this is botany. This is about plants, because you've got a tremendously big picture of plants on this poster. So really try and think about, is there some image, picture, photograph that you can have on your poster that will identify what your poster is? How can you make it distinct? Tip number 4. Don't be afraid to interrogate a little bit of the people who come to your poster. When you're presenting a poster, it's very easy to get into a mode of just presenting the tour, of just, here's my poster, blah, 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 blah. Here's what we tried to find, right? And not actually take a minute and actually engage in conversation with the person who stopped at your poster, right? Here's a very simple thing that will help unlock a better chance of a good, meaningful, productive conversation. Ask why they stopped. Because anyone who stops at a poster, pretty much every time, they have some sort of connection to that poster. Find out what that is. For instance, if you give a poster about the ecology of Australian snakes, you're going to probably get 3 kinds of people at that poster: ecologists, herpetologists who study snakes, and Australians. It won't even matter if they have any intellectual contribution. It's like, Australia, I know about that. And that's one of the things that you want to find out. What is the thing of the various things that you might want to have on your poster? What's that one thing that made them think, I want to see what there is to learn on that poster? So those are my 4 suggestions. And I will just stop there and say thank you.
Fantastic, Zen. That was really excellent. I thoroughly enjoyed that presentation. Being an Aussie who definitely would stop at a poster that said Australian, even if it was about snakes, and I'm not anywhere in that field. Fantastic. So let me just change my view and quickly check the chat. So I have a question for you.
Yeah.
First up, I absolutely adored the way that you presented this. I'm not sure, that doesn't come under the purview of your poster presentations, but I'd love you to share your tips and tricks on how to present with this shared screen. But before you do that, I think something that I've always felt intimidating in poster halls is the norm is to do a lot of the posters you presented that you critiqued kind of looks like the stock standard poster. And a part of me gets a little bit nervous about being the one that stands out, even though I know that I should be the one that stands out. Can you speak a little bit to whether is there anything in me being uncomfortable about straying from the norm? And I worry that it won't be scientific enough. Like, can you speak anything to that?
I absolutely can. First of all, what kind of is a typical poster? I mean, I showed a couple in this talk here. Let me just drop down and bring up one here, right? So this is kind of the standard academic poster. Title up at the top, authors, 3 columns of stuff, right? And that is a really fantastic layout. It is one of those things that is really, really hard to screw up. I've made a lot of posters like this, right? And really, if you are happy with that format, like you don't want to go too far with that, standard 3-column poster format is fantastic. Now, people screw it up in other ways, right? You can really take that sort of stock standard looking poster and really make it sing so that it will still stand out by virtue of having focus, clarity, good graphics, and good layout, right? Now, that said, if you do want to do something a little bit different, I do actually have like a longer story about that, but I will just say that there are many instances of people who did do something a little bit different, and pretty much every single time it goes so much better than they possibly could have hoped, right? I said I'm not going to tell the whole story unless there's time at the end. We can come back to it, and I'll tell you Raven Baxter's story. I'll stop before I do that.
Okay, great. I look forward to hopefully being able to hear this story.
Oh, and the one other thing that you did mention, this I am using Prezi Video. There's a few different tools that do similar things that look for virtual camera, and there's a few different apps that will pop up that will allow you to keep the material in the screen while you're talking.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Zen. Did anyone else have any questions before we move on to Stuart? You're welcome to pop your hand up or pop it in the chat. I'll just give you a second or two if anyone does. Oh, beautiful. Thank you, Zen. Alrighty, well, off to our next fantastic presenter, Stuart Oldham. So he is a senior research officer in the developmental imaging group at the Murdoch Children's Research Institute in Melbourne, Australia. And Stuart will be speaking on oral presentations. Many of you in our community may have come across one of Stuart's spectacular presentations. He has been termed the PowerPoint wizard. Take it away, Stu.
Oh, that puts so much pressure on because now this has got to be good. So hopefully my slides are up.
Yep, looks good.
Excellent. Yeah, so thank you for the introduction, Erin. So, I do many things in my job, but probably my great love is PowerPoint. And so I want to sort of, I guess, share my philosophy of how I think about PowerPoint and how I like to approach this problem, because it is a problem. And it's, in some respects, a solved problem because it might surprise you is that in PowerPoint, we're faced with the challenge of presenting our work in an audio-visual format. And there is an entire field of human study dedicated to finding the best ways to present information in an audio-visual format. And that is, as already so beautifully articulated by Zen, the movies. And there is lots we can learn and take from the movies and sort of to inspire how we shape our own work. So we can think of this, instead of, telling an epic tale of good versus evil, what we're really doing is telling an epic tale of how we fit a GLM to some data. And I've identified, I guess, 5 things which I think we can take from movies and stories and narratives in general, which I'll go through today. And so these things are purpose, story, structure, adaptation, and direction. And I've presented these things and we'll discuss them as sort of distinct entities, but really a lot of these things feed into each other and will influence how you shape each of them in turn. So to start off with the purpose. So what is the purpose of a movie, for example, or any sort of story? And the purpose of that primarily is to entertain the audience, is to give them a good time. You want people to come and see your work and appreciate it. And when we think of something like PowerPoint, I think the way a lot of us tend to approach the purpose is just to regurgitate everything we've done from our journal article. And I want to sort of contend that actually we should think of movies as PowerPoints as sort of being equivalent, is that we should have a similar goal in that we should be trying to entertain and give our audience as good a time as possible. So we need to think about like what our audience really wants. And when we think of the audience that we're going to be presenting to, they're going to, for the most part, they're going to be scientists. And what do scientists really like? What do they really want out of the talk? And, us as scientists, if you're a scientist, you probably love learning. It's, really sort of core to your identity and probably, really why you got into science. So I like to think for the purpose of a talk is to really help your audience, other scientists, really understand and learn about why you made the decisions you did, why you're interested in a particular topic, and particularly what you found. So really, reframe your sort of thinking as, not so much as I need to tell everyone what I did, but I really want to show my audience and help them understand and teach them why I did my particular approach. And one way we can sort of help do this teaching is through the use of stories. So the question is what makes a good story, or what makes a good narrative? And central to this is this idea of conflict and resolution. And you can call this many different things: setup and payoff, problem solution, anticipation outcome, cause and effect, or prediction and error, because we're all nerds here. The central issue is that you're basically saying that there is some problem in the way of my progress, and I'm going to solve it in this particular way, and this is what I found. That's the central setup. And so if we were to graph, over time, like how this conflict and resolution works. So conflict generates tension. Tension generates interest. So, let's think of a movie example, the heroes, they're being pursued by the Balrog. That provides some tension. You want to know, like, what happens next? How do they get away from the Balrog? And, the resolution stage, would be that, Gandalf dies and the rest of the Fellowship are kind of sad. Spoiler alert. But there's a critical component missing in this relationship, and that is this sense of action. So there is some sort of conflict, there's some issue, and some action needs to be taken to resolve that conflict, which in this case is Gandalf confronts the Balrog. And so this basically central loop is, what we can use to generate interest. And this sort of works well for applying to our presentations and our work, because we have some conflict. We have, some, 2 variables, and we want to know we don't know if they're related. And our fact that we don't know if they're related is some sort of barrier to our scientific progress. We take some action to figure out, are they related, to resolve this conflict, like a correlation. And then finally, we get our resolution. We produce our scatter plot, get our R² value. And so you can lose this kind of loop to keep generating interest in your talk by just reinforcing it over and over. You present that here's my problem, here's what I've done to solve it, and here's what I found. That helps maintain interest. And so narrative really forms the fundamental building block of the structure of your talk. And on that note, let's talk about, thinking about the overall structure. And so returning to this narrative framework stretches across the entire work. So, we think of something about Lord of the Rings, the ring is initially found, and then as the tension rises, you can see that there's these loops. That's where these like incremental problems are encountered, like the Balrog, like the marshes, and each of these has to be overcome in turn before you get to the final resolution. The ring is destroyed, spoiler alert, and then you get your resolution and your endings and your conclusions and bringing together, what you have learned, what has changed. And so this narrative structure, it's generally organized like this. You have some background, we give the lay of the land, some instigating incident, there's some sort of initial problem, this phase of rising action where there's a series of sort of smaller obstacles progressively solved until you finally solve the big major problem and you get this sense of resolution. And hopefully you might be able to see is this sort of really nicely fits with the sort of the structure of science and the way we present science, particularly at talks. You start with your introduction, set the lay of the land, you set up your aim that is really demonstrating that there's some kind of problem. You have your methods, how you're solving a particular bunch of problems, your results, your solutions to all those problems, and then finally you wrap it all up together with your discussion. And so, thinking about sort of narrative or the structure of our talk within the context of narrative, we can sort of understand why, problems can emerge with sort of standard talks, with, many talks we see. For instance, one trap I often observe is the introductions are really, really, really long in some academic talks. And if we fit this onto our narrative structure, we can see why this doesn't really work, why it's not compelling, because you're not generating any tension when you're, most commonly when you're describing your intro. You're not really adequately setting up the problem. So I always sort of recommend try keep your introduction sort of as tight as possible so you can start building that tension immediately. But the other way we can think, applying this structure to our talks is, often, we're not just doing like one method and one result. We're often having a series of methods and a series of results. And this is the standard way that someone would probably structure their talk. And this is all very well and good, but there's sort of like two problems. The first thing is, like method one applies to result one. And these, they're separated temporally in time. And so, when you talk about method one, and then later on the talk, you talk about the first result, your audience has to remember, okay, what was that first method that was being used? And, when they're trying to remember that, suddenly they're not thinking about your talk anymore. They're sort of, lost trying to get themselves up to speed. And the second thing is that this, works against sort of the narrative I was setting up before. You're setting up some sort of tension or some sort of problem, and then you're just like immediately moving on to other problems and you're not giving that sort of resolution. So you're not really getting those sort of efficient narrative loops. So what I sort of contend, and the way I order my talks, is to make it like this, where I'm immediately pairing the result with its corresponding method, and then I'm building on these. And you can see that this sort of fits into sort of our narrative structure. And so really what this looks like in practice is, I've got my intro, I come up with my initial aim, then I say, how do I address that aim? I have my initial method, and that produces some result. That result set suggests some further problem, which I resolve with method two, and I get my result two, and so on and so forth until you've covered sort of the scope of your project. And so we have this narrative structure, and we need to know, okay, what things do we want to put into this narrative structure? And that brings us to the idea of adaptation. So really a PowerPoint is an adaptation of your full project, of your journal article. And as we discussed before, it's sort of very common that, when people are trying to sort of adapt into a PowerPoint, it's just going to be, here's everything that I have done, as, the previous speakers have also pointed out. And when we think of a movie, like in many cases, a movie is just an adaptation. In the case of Lord of the Rings, you have the extended edition, and then you have an adaptation of that in the theatrical release. And each of these is really distilling things down to the core story. And so you can think, from like the original text, you have, Tom Bombadil, and it's sort of, has Tom Bombadil is sort of argued to be very sort of thematically important to showing, how one can overcome the power of the ring. But in terms of sort of driving the narrative forward of Lord of the Rings, Tom Bombadil is completely irrelevant, so we can get rid of him. So what we should need to think of when we're sort of making our talks, looking to the work we've done and thinking, okay, what's going to make the best possible story? And to sort of show you an example of this is a recent project of mine where I was looking at, rates of determining how the thalamus matures, how this maturation affects thalamic organization, how it relates to genes, how this maturation relates to thalamocortical connectivity, how connectivity relates to the sensory association axis, how maturation predicts cortical features, and finally how virtual ablation of thalamocortical connectivity influences cortical features. That's a lot. So, I was thinking, okay, so how do I adapt this for a PowerPoint? And it's thinking, what's the best story I can tell from this? What do I think the audience is going to be most interested in understanding? And what can I most easily sort of teach them and help them understand within the course of the time I've been allocated? And so ultimately what I settled on in my talk is that these were the three things I focused on. I focused on describing how the thalamus matures, how this maturation relates to thalamocortical connectivity, and how these patterns of connectivity predict network features. So that's a sort of a nice, easy progression of ideas, and it allows me to really fit within this narrative structure well. And, all these other, data points, well, they're sort of, they're all these other sort of sub areas of the project, they are interesting, but in regards to telling the strongest story possible, they have to be sacrificed. We can't love all our children equally. You have to choose which results you want to put forward into your work, into your presentation as to best illustrate them. And I think, trying to identify the best story can be sort of difficult. And one little trick or tip I give to people is you've probably already decided what the most interesting story from your work is. And you've probably already done that in the abstract to your work, because in the abstract, you'd give your quick overview, you'll give your methods, your major results, and your final discussion. So I think if you really want to identify like what's the key story of your work, go to your abstract or write an abstract for your work if it's not ready, and that'll help distill, okay, what's the really core key message that I need to adapt into my presentation. And the final thing I want to talk about is direction. So very famously, when you go see the movies, you see something that looks a little like this. What you don't see is something like this. This is an audio-visual format. We really want to, present visuals and really engage interest in the audience. And, fittingly, the only time that masses of text really work in a movie is when this appears. And largely, this only really works is because it has one of the best soundtracks of all time. And when you give a talk, you probably do not have one of the best soundtracks of all time in the background. So we know that text isn't great. So why do we see so many instances of this, which is just masses of text on the screen? And, it should be sort of very obvious, well, hopefully obvious why this isn't particularly good. And it really works against you. Like, firstly, it's not particularly memorable. If you think, of days after the talk, people are just going to forget about your text. Whereas if you have, really strong visuals, that'll stick in people's minds more. And also on a more like fundamental psychological level, it's like you can read information. You can easily listen to someone talk about information. But if you need to read and listen to someone talk about information, which is different to what you're reading, is that you can't do that. We do not have the processing ability. So what I would very strongly urge is you to remove as much text from your slides as possible and rely on visuals. And, when I think of visuals, when we talk about like sort of directing, I think of really a PowerPoint as sort of, it's like a camera, it's a screen. And much like a movie director, I'm positioning my camera to illustrate things. So, if I wanted to illustrate that a conversation between two characters is important, I'd probably show a close-up of them. I wouldn't show them, tiny and in frame. That suggests they're unimportant. And especially what you would do if you wanted to show that a particular conversation was important, you wouldn't show it then simultaneously alongside a whole bunch of other conversations. So then again, why do we often see many instances of this, which is just visual information overload? And it's impossible to know, like, okay, what's the important thing in here? Where should I look? So you should use the idea of a director to focus people's attention onto particular things. So, I'd suggest maybe redoing this figure. So, if you're going to focus on this, pull it out and make it nice and big and then sort of walk through it. And we can also impart sort of our narrative loops on this. So why give everyone the information at once? So if I'm revealing these models, why don't I sort of reveal them over time and build up, this potential, as one is generating sort of interest, or one is improving upon the other or getting worse, and sort of building sort of my narrative loop like that. So with that, I would like to end. So just to recap, for purpose, make sure you're thinking about you're trying to teach your audience understanding and really work towards helping their understanding. Use narrative and stories to create interest and particular structure your talk to take advantage of narrative. Adapt your work to tell the strongest story you can. And finally, use visuals to sort of direct your audience to what is the most important stuff. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Stuart. Another brilliant talk. And I'm loving all this Star Wars and Lord of the Rings content. Fantastic. I would love to hear your opinion on how difficult or like how much time does it take you to create such beautiful, engaging slides in PowerPoint? Like, is that something that is a steep learning curve, or can you speak much to that?
It's like, how long is a piece of string? It's generally, you can create like good talks fairly quickly. I guess it depends on, because I've said, you really want to sort of orient your talks around visuals. And if you've got really strong visuals existing from your work, then it's very easy that, you can just, pick the relevant elements, make them really, really big, and you can just stick them in. And provided you can sort of, identify these sort of narrative hooks, you can talk to that pretty easily, and your audience is going to be pretty happy. I like to go to overkill and sort of really, you're thinking of this sort of this movie structure. I often think of my data as sort of like the character in my work. So I really try to make my PowerPoint such that I'm following the progression of my character, my data, throughout the entire talk. And so that can require a little bit of effort and planning. But I mean, I would argue, particularly if you're presenting your talk at somewhere like OHBM, which is really, it's really probably a defining moment in your career. It's worth the while taking a significant amount of time to really focus on putting together a really strong talk and actually really spending a lot of time working on it. Because, most of us, we've been to OHBM or we've been to other conferences, we've seen talks. We know that there's sort of dime a dozen, and so many will just like fade from memory. And anytime someone's put like real effort into their talk and, put really strong visuals and to give really strong hooks, they stand out and we tend to remember them. So I would say, yes, it can require some significant investment, but I think it's well worth it.
And it is just a joy to watch your presentations, especially amongst the context of a very information-dense conference where you're spending a lot of time thinking and comprehending, to be able to step us through these really big concepts in a super user-friendly way. It is such a joy. So I can completely understand the value of that. Zen, did you have a question?
I just wanted to follow up on the preparation aspect of this, because I think the other thing in terms of, besides working on the visuals, is if you're doing an oral talk, rehearse out loud. If you're doing like a few times before, if you're doing a poster, rehearse out loud, like, which sounds stupid, but really walking and saying, okay, how am I going to present this poster again in under 5 minutes? Because that's how long people will give you before they get impatient. That element I just wanted to reiterate is really, really critical, in addition to all the preparation on the visuals that you're doing as well. I ran through my talk like just 3 times in the hour before we got on this call, just to make sure I could do it in my 10 minutes.
It's a really good
I'd also
point.
say, like, as a sort of like a practice tip for sort of doing your talk, one thing I find really helpful is to actually give my talk without my slides, without the poster there, to actually walk away and then go and give it. Because, firstly, it'll help you identify areas of your talk that you just are not comfortable with. Like when you stumble and you can't do it from memory, it's like, okay, that's an area of problem that I need to address. And the other thing you need to do is to sort of, if you're a musician, this should, hopefully come sort of naturally, is that when we practice something, we don't practice a piece from start to end. You pick a particular section and you focus on that. So if there's a part of your talk which is just really, you're really struggling with, just repeat that section just, 10 times or something, instead of having to repeat your entire 10-minute talk, and just focus on that particular section, and that'll help get you up to speed much faster.
Fantastic. That's a really good point. We have a question in the chat. We've got a question about networking for all the speakers. I am a final year PhD student, potentially looking for a postdoc opportunity. How did you find your postdoc? Is it through connecting with professors or other postdocs in the potential lab at OHBM? If so, any tips on how to do them? I think that's a really excellent question.
I can go first. Since my most recent employment is postdoc, so I'm very close to that field. So I'll go first. So how I find my past, previous postdoc, is that I connecting with professor by myself by emailing them that, hey, I want to bring this, like, I really love my PhD project. I can see the value of my PhD project in your lab, in the population that you are studying right now. And I'm also really like admire to your work, that the work the lab done. So I really looking forward to bring my expertise and knowledge to contribute to your field. So when I got most of the postdoc like interview with no topic, but I'm the different side. I was like, I want to do this with this in this population. The PI said we don't have funding. I said that's okay. I write the grant. He said I don't know how to do the RB, but that's okay. I ending up writing the RB, the research ethic board proposal, and submitted by myself, and also preparing the grant proposal for the lab just to do my own research that I interview on day one. So that's how I got my postdoc. Yeah, but I also got recruited to another postdoc at OHBM right in front of my poster too. So here is the opportunity. So if I hope you get lots of good suggestion today, and if you bring that and practice it over and over, hopefully you can apply it on your poster section at OHBM 2026. You will be surprised how someone just walk to you and then, hey, do you want to work with me? Like here. And then the conversation starts from there.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Nog. Now, I'm conscious we are over time, but did Zen or Stuart want to say a couple of comments in response to that question at all?
I'll say quickly, don't overlook the advantage of, cultivating relationships over time. Like, you might be able to go to OHBM and get a postdoc immediately from someone, but the relationships you form down the line might suddenly be very, very, very important, particularly like your peers, because, one day your peers are going to be your colleagues, your colleagues are going to be at other universities, and, they're going to, be going up sort of their status, and, when you suddenly want to start advancing your own career, if you can start having there's people that you know in other countries, and in particular you like, and more importantly, they like you, then you're going to it's going to be really easy for you to make collaborations. And so that's going to be sort of really important. So always go into, like a conference with a sort of open mind, be really kind and generous to everyone you meet and in your conversations, because you never know, like down the line, what it can lead to.
And if I can just jump in, I will say that I know it's hard to believe given my youthful appearance, but when I got a postdoc was a different world. And the way I got postdocs are probably not really relevant to people anymore. I will say that I really think that the cold email and writing like a good inquiry email is a really undervalued skill, because I didn't really get a lot of cold emails from potential students or postdocs in my positions. But boy, a lot of them were horrible. I'll just give a couple of examples. I would have frequently get emails saying, "Dear Sir" or "Madam." It's like, if you don't know which of those categories I fall into, that's not a good sign. And I would sometimes get, like, my personal research background is in crustacean neurobiology. And I would occasionally get somebody who would say, "I'm really excited about genetic modification of crop plants." It's like, why are you emailing me? I cannot help you. And so those, what you would think would be the absolute baseline for writing a good email, you'd be surprised how many people can't even reach that bar. So work on the good inquiry email, because you might get a lot further with that than you think, because the competition isn't very stiff for writing a good email.
Thank you so much. I think that they were all really, really good answers to this question. And today's workshop was just spectacular, guys. It was really, really great. We value all of your expertise. Thank you for sharing them so beautifully. I guess it came in the title with the presentation skills and conference skills. So naturally, you guys are excellent. This has been recorded and will go up on the Student and Postdoc Special Interest Group YouTube, so we can share that with colleagues and friends. I think this is a really excellent resource. So thanks again to Nock, Stuart and Zen, and to Matthew for organising this session, and we'll leave it there.